please get up. That seat is reserved for my wife. My son, Grant, muttered in front of all 40 guests at my own birthday party. His voice carried that anxious yet stubborn edge he always got whenever Vanessa pushed him to do her dirty work. Right at that exact second, the catering manager stepped up beside me and discreetly slid the itemized invoice onto the table. It was my 65th birthday, but Vanessa had seamlessly hijacked the entire event, turning it into a personal showcase to flaunt in front of her own friends. Vanessa flashed a triumphant smile, fully expecting me to just shrug it off and give in, the way I'd been doing for the last 3 years since my husband passed. The guests stared uncomfortably at their plates. The entire room went dead silent. In my hands, I held a blue folder showing a grand total of $4,500. I felt a flash of heat rush up my neck, but I took a deep breath. I wasn't about to make a dramatic scene. That has never been my style. I looked Grant dead in the eye, picked up my purse, tucked the invoice inside, and stood up without saying a single word. I walked over to a small folding table in the furthest corner of the backyard and took a seat. Vanessa claimed my spot immediately, practically glowing, completely oblivious to the awkwardness suffocating the rest of the room. From my corner, I watched the scene unfold with a cold precision that surprised even me. Grant threw a guilty glance my way from across the lawn, but I just gave him a faint nod. The party dragged on, but in my mind, the entire blueprint of my life had just shifted. When the catering manager walked past my table, I gave him a subtle sign to come over. It was time for my first move. "Mrs. Vance, is everything all right with the service?" the manager asked quietly, noticing my sudden change of seating. "The service today is absolutely perfect. Mr. Harrison, I'll authorize the wire transfer tonight," I replied, smoothing out the tablecloth with my hands. "However, I need you to take tomorrow morning's Sunday brunch off my tab. Cancel it entirely." Mr. Harrison blinked, visibly caught off guard. That exclusive catered buffet breakfast was supposed to be Vanessa's grand surprise for her immediate family, funded entirely by my credit card. Of course. "Are you sure we've already prepped a good portion of the ingredients?" "Completely sure. If anyone asks, tell them there was a budget modification." Later that night, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the quiet of my kitchen. For years, I had been financially carrying Grant and Vanessa. They lived completely rent-free in the 2-story apartment we had built over the detached garage. I covered their groceries, their cleaning supplies, and their basic utilities, thinking I was helping them save for their own future. Instead, I had raised 2 adults who genuinely believed my money and my property belonged to them by right. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements. The sheer volume of minor expenses I routinely absorbed for them was staggering. I closed the screen with a firm snap. The lingering sadness was completely gone, replaced by a liberating sense of clarity. Tomorrow was going to be an interesting day, going to. At exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, I heard Vanessa's hurried footsteps coming down the exterior wooden stairs of the garage apartment. I was sitting out on my patio, enjoying my first cup of black coffee and soaking in the crisp morning air. She marched into the backyard, her brow furrowed deeply, clutching her phone. "Audrey, the catering company just called me. They said you canceled the brunch. My parents are literally on their way over right now." "What is that supposed to mean?" she demanded, skipping any form of a greeting. I took a slow sip of my coffee, set the mug back onto its saucer, and looked up at her with complete serenity. "It means exactly what they told you. Vanessa, I canceled it. My budget for this weekend has officially reached its limit." She let out an incredulous scoff, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. "You can't just do that. I invited 12 people. What am I supposed to feed them? I suppose you'll have to use your own kitchen and your own money to figure that out, I replied matter-of-factly. I already paid my dues for hospitality yesterday. Grant came running out right behind her, looking exhausted and disheveled. Before he could even open his mouth to defend his wife, I calmly stood up, picked up my mug, and walked toward my back door. There was nothing to debate. I had drawn the first line, and the look of sheer panic on Vanessa's face told me my shot had landed exactly where it needed to. On Monday mornings, Vanessa had a habit of walking straight into my house through the side door by the laundry room to borrow ingredients from my large refrigerator before heading to work. It was a routine I had always loathed, but one I tolerated just to keep the peace. At 7 o'clock sharp, I heard the familiar jingle of her keys, followed by the metallic thud of the deadbolt jamming. She tried turning it 3 times, rattling the doorknob with growing impatience. I stood on the other side of the door, quietly drying a plate, enjoying every single second of the sound. I had called a locksmith first thing Sunday afternoon. A moment later, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was Grant. "Mom, did you change the locks on the laundry room door Vanessa can't get in to grab milk for her smoothie?" "That's right. Grant," I answered, keeping my voice steady and professional. "Starting today, I am reclaiming my privacy. You two have your own apartment and your own front door." "But Mom, we've always shared the pantry. You didn't even give us a heads up." "Now you know. Have a great day at work." I hung up before he could stammer out another excuse, walking into the foyer. I looked at the key rack by the front door. Hanging there were the spare keys to the second car, the compact gray sedan I had bought outright 2 years ago, which Grant used exclusively for his daily commute. They treated it like his car, even though the title, the insurance, and the maintenance bills were strictly in my name. I took the keys off the hook, feeling the cold weight of the metal. Their invisible luxuries were about to disappear. On Tuesday afternoon, I waited until they both got home from work. They were sitting on the patio chairs, whispering intensely to one another, likely arguing about the sudden lack of groceries in their fridge. I walked outside holding 2 crisp white envelopes and laid them flat on the glass table right in front of them. Vanessa glared at them suspiciously. "What's this? The utility breakdown for the garage apartment," I said, remaining standing. "Starting the 1st of next month, the automatic payments for your electricity, water, and gas will no longer be debited from my account. You will need to call the utility companies yourselves to set up accounts in your own names." Grant's eyes went wide as he pulled the paperwork from the envelope, staring at the sheets as if they were toxic waste. "Mom, this is a lot of money," Grant stammered, looking up at me helplessly. "You know Vanessa just cut back her hours at the clinic to have more downtime. We can't absorb these fixed costs out of nowhere without canceling our winter trip." I looked down at him without a single blink. There was no anger in my heart, only absolute, unshakable clarity. "Then you will have to adjust your spending habits accordingly. Turn off the lights, downgrade your internet package, or cancel the trip. That is basic financial management for any adult household. This is a total tantrum over Saturday night," Vanessa snapped, slamming her hand on the armrest as she stood up. "You're punishing us out of spite." "No, Vanessa, I am simply cutting off funding for people who treat me like an unwanted extra at my own table," I corrected her, keeping my voice low and perfectly even. "You wanted to be the main hosts. Now you are." I turned around deliberately, picked up my glass, and walked back inside. I could hear them through the glass doors, yelling and throwing blame back and forth. But the utility bill was just the beginning. The real shock to their system was waiting right up the stairs in their own living room. When Grant and Vanessa first moved into the apartment over the garage, The place was completely bare. In a misguided effort to help my son start his marriage on the right foot, I furnished the entire space. I used my own credit card to buy the massive leather sectional, the 60-inch smart TV for the living room, and the top-tier washer and dryer set. In my mind, it was an indefinite family loan. In Vanessa's mind, it was a permanent tribute that gave her the right to look down her nose at me. On Thursday morning, the moment I saw both of their cars pull out of the driveway for work, I opened the side gate. I had spent the last few nights listing those specific high-end pieces on a local online marketplace because I priced them to sell quickly and held the original receipts proving sole ownership. The deals were locked in within hours. By 11 o'clock, a small moving truck backed into the driveway. I stood by calmly as the buyers carefully disassembled the sectional and loaded up the appliances. In less than 45 minutes, their living room and laundry closet were stripped completely bare, leaving nothing but the hollow echo of an empty space. At 6 that evening, I was back in the yard, wearing my heavy gardening gloves as I tended to my flower beds. I heard their apartment door slam open, followed by a dead, horrified silence, and then Vanessa's piercing shriek. She came flying down the wooden stairs, nearly tripping over her own heels, with Grant trailing closely behind, looking like he had just seen a ghost. "We've been robbed!" Vanessa screamed, hysterical, waving her arms in the air. "Someone broke in and cleared out the couch, the TV, and the washer. There's literally nothing up there. Call the police." I stood up straight, brushed a bit of mulch off my apron, and looked at her with total composure. "Nobody broke in, Vanessa. I let the buyers in myself." Grant froze, his jaw dropping. "Buyers? Mom, what are you talking about? Those were our things." "No, Grant, those were my things," I corrected him smoothly, pulling off one glove to tap open a folder of digital receipts on my phone. Every single item was purchased with my money and remained under my name. Since my personal budget is tight right now, I decided to liquidate my assets to pad my own savings. "You can't just leave us sitting on the bare floor," Vanessa yelled, her voice shaking with a mix of rage and pure panic. "Of course I can. And I highly suggest you start browsing Facebook Marketplace or thrift stores this weekend," I replied, turning back to my flowers. "Oh, and make sure you don't let your laundry pile up too high." They trudged back up the stairs in a heavy, suffocating silence. The hollow thud of their footsteps echoed through the empty apartment. But their biggest hurdle regarding basic mobility was hit right at sunrise the following morning. By Friday morning, the atmosphere on the property was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I had been up since 6, brewing a fresh pot of black coffee and sitting at the kitchen island with the morning paper. From my window, I had a perfect view of the entire driveway. I knew my son's routine inside and out. Grant drove a compact gray sedan that I had paid for in full 2 years ago, even though he used it every single day to commute to his corporate job downtown. The car title, the premium insurance policy, and every single oil change came straight out of my checking account. To him, it was his car. To me, it was simply an asset registered to my name. At exactly 7:30, the garage apartment door swung open hard. Grant hurried down the stairs, frantically adjusting his tie with one hand while digging through his pockets with the other. He rushed up to the sedan, yanked on the handle, and realized it was locked tight. He marched over to my kitchen door and knocked urgently on the glass. I opened it slowly, holding my coffee mug. "Mom, I can't find the car keys anywhere," he said, breathing heavily. "I left them on the patio table last night and they're gone. I'm going to be incredibly late for my quarterly review." I reached into my cardigan pocket, pulled out the key fob, and let it jingle softly between my fingers. I have them. Grant. He let out a sigh of relief and reached out to take them. But I closed my hand and took a step back. The insurance policy on this vehicle expires next week, along with the registration. I've decided not to renew them. In fact, I'm listing the car for sale this afternoon. As I'm sure you understand, I can't let you drive it without proper coverage. Grant's hand hung uselessly in the air. The absolute weight of his new reality finally hit his face. Mom, please, my office is 5 miles away. I can't walk there in a full suit. How am I supposed to keep my job? I looked at him without a shred of pity, keeping my voice completely level. The Route 42 bus passes right by the corner every 15 minutes. It drops off 2 blocks from your office building. I suggest you start walking now if you want to catch the 7:45. You're suffocating us, he whispered, his shoulders slumping as the total weight of his dependence on me became painfully clear. I'm independenting you. Grant, have a great day. I slid the glass door shut quietly and went back to my coffee. I watched him sprint awkwardly down the driveway toward the main road, his briefcase banging against his leg. I had cut off their utilities, their furniture, and their transportation. They were completely cornered by their own financial reality. But I still had one final move left, concerning the very roof over their heads. The next 2 weeks were a brutal crash course in reality for them. They had to buy cheap furniture on credit, figure out public transit schedules, and cook every single one of their meals at home. I, on the other hand, spent my afternoons reading on the porch and taking long, quiet walks. One evening, Grant walked down the stairs to find me. He had dark circles under his eyes and a completely defeated posture. Mom, please, Vanessa is losing her mind with stress. We get the point. Okay, can we just go back to the way things were? We're so sorry about the party. She didn't mean to insult you. I smiled, not out of malice, but with the quiet peace of someone who no longer carries someone else's baggage. I'm not trying to teach you a lesson, Grant. I'm simply restructuring my life for my own peace of mind. In fact, I wanted to talk to you about this property. I handed him a slim manila folder. I've decided to lease out this main house. It's far too large for me to manage alone. A lovely family with 3 young kids and 2 dogs signed the lease agreement yesterday. They move in at the end of the month. Grant stared at the lease, completely incredulous. What total strangers living down here? Where are you going to go? I rented a small condo right across from the park downtown, just for me. You 2 are welcome to stay in the garage apartment, but you will have to deal with your new neighbors directly. My responsibility to this house is officially over. The reality of living directly above a loud, busy family with zero access to my kitchen, my food, or my money finally crushed whatever entitlement he had left. The move was fast and seamless. I hired a professional packing company to handle my keepsakes and essentials. As the movers loaded my boxes onto the truck, Vanessa stood out on her small balcony, arms crossed tightly, watching the scene with a completely blank, hollow expression. Her entire long-term plan of pushing me into a corner while waiting to inherit the property had collapsed without me ever having to raise my voice. Grant walked up to my car door right before I closed it. He looked like he was on the verge of tears. I am so incredibly sorry for taking your seat that night. Mom, I was a coward. I stood by and let her disrespect you in your own home. I looked up at him through the rolled-down window. Respect isn't something you beg for, Grant. It's earned. Actions have consequences. You 2 made your choice that Saturday night, and I simply made mine on Sunday morning. When are we going to see you? He asked, gripping the edge of the window frame. Once I get settled in, I'll send you my new address. You can come over for coffee, just you. When you prove to me that you can build a life without relying on my wallet, then we can start working on a healthy relationship as mother and son. I started the engine. There were no dramatic screaming matches, no idle threats, and no tears. Just the quiet hum of tires pulling away from the place where I had been treated like an inconvenience, leaving two fully grown adults to finally figure out the real world on their own. Today is Tuesday, and I am sitting out on the balcony of my new condo. It's a cozy, single-story place. Incredibly easy to keep clean, and absolutely flooded with morning light. There are no massive yards to landscape and no inflated utility bills to cover. Everything in this space belongs completely to me, and it operates entirely at my own pace. Grant calls me every Sunday afternoon. His voice sounds different now, more grounded, noticeably tired, but authentic. He tells me that the new tenants downstairs host loud barbecues every single weekend, and that their dogs start barking at the crack of dawn. He mentioned that he and Vanessa are looking for a cheaper apartment on the edge of town because they can't handle the noise or the rent. I just listen, nod, and wish him the best of luck. Vanessa hasn't reached out once, which I consider an absolute win for my peace of mind. I take a slow sip of my chamomile tea and watch people stroll through the park across the street. That incident at my birthday party was, ironically, the absolute best gift they could have given me. It jarred me out of a routine where I was completely taken for granted. I didn't have to fight or scream for my seat at the table. I simply stood up, built my own table, and made sure I kept the only key. When it's all said and done, the greatest lesson I took from this entire experience isn't about getting even. It's about clarity. Sometimes, we get so wrapped up in giving, protecting, and compromising that we accidentally blur our own boundaries of self-respect. I learned that you don't need to raise your voice, cry, or try to convince anyone of your worth. The most powerful form of respect is the one you grant yourself through your own actions. Cutting off their financial cushioning wasn't cruel. It was simply handing them back their adult responsibilities so I could reclaim my right to a peaceful life. A mother's love can be unconditional, but access to our time, our homes, and our hard-earned peace is a privilege. Realizing I had the power to change my entire reality just by turning off the tap and changing the locks was the greatest act of self-care I've ever chosen.